My name is Agnieszka Chłoń-Domińczak, and most of you know me because we've been exchanging emails and everything. However, I will have a couple of roles today. And right now put my hat as a Vice Rector for Research at the Warsaw School of Economics. And on behalf of our Rector, I would like to very warmly welcome you in Warsaw at this fourth NDC Conference, which is also a conference which is organized as a part of celebrating 120th anniversary of our university. So we are extremely proud that we have survived those 120 years, but also that during those 120 years, we've been assisting various reforms that happened in Poland in the course of time, including especially transition. This is our university faculty members such as Professor Leszek Balcerowicz were involved in the huge transitional reforms of early 1990s, which I think some of you remember, including Professor Barr, who advised at that time our government. We've been also involved in the preparation of the pension reform in Poland, introduced the notional defined contribution pensions with Marek Góra sitting over there being one of the leaders of these reforms, together with Michał Rutkowski, who at that time took a leave from the World Bank to lead our pension reform office that I had a huge pleasure to be a part of, which is a history how I got in, but if you know, during the coffee break, I can explain. Nothing shameful there. But it is indeed a huge pleasure to welcome you here. And I hope we will have very good 2 days of catching up, discussions, exchanges related to one of the topics which are the most challenging. It is the functioning of pension systems in the times of profound changes, including the demographic change, economic change, but also various megatrends such as digitization, globalization and deglobalization, and all the shocks that we are suffering. Our conference is organized in a partnership with Social Security Institution, and we are extremely grateful to Social Security Institution of being here with us, and especially President Derdziuk, who unfortunately still cannot come, but he was one of the people that was very enthusiastic about partnership with that. We are also another partner is an extremely important partner, which is Swedish Pensions Agency, and thank you very much for being with us. The Swedish Pensions Agency has been involved in all 4 conferences organized along the topics of the NDC, so that's an important continuity that we really appreciate. With that said, I would like to pass the voice to Minister Sebastian Gajewski, Undersecretary of State and the Minister of Family and Social Policy, who also is responsible for the pensions issues in these days, which are very challenging again. And we've been discussing that we've been taking over this important task across different governments, but with the sense of the continuity that we need to hold on to the most important aspects of providing the best and adequate and stable pensions to people in Poland. Minister Gajewski, if I could ask you to come.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank for the invitation. Say it's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to share a few remarks at the opening of the 4th NDC Conference 2026, Global Megatrends and the Challenges for Pension Systems. I am a lawyer, so I entered this whole feeling a little bit anxious, being hosted on the best economic university in Poland and having a perspective of presenting opening remarks during economic conference, but I'm also a politician, and you know politicians are always self-confident and know everything the best, so let's stick to this rule. There is not the only ideal pension system designed for all times, all countries, all societies. Its optimal shape is the result of various factors that change over time: demographic factors, financial factors, economic factors, cultural factors, and political factors. This is why, from my perspective as a politician, as a scientist, there is an obvious need for ongoing debate on the challenges facing the pension system and the best responses to them. These answers are not universal. For this reason, I am very pleased with the initiative of Warsaw Economic University and the Social Insurance Institution that I have the pleasure of overseeing to organize this conference. Today you will be discussing pension plans, a key element of which is the formula for determining the pension amount, comparing the advantages and disadvantages of non-financial defined contribution and financial defined contribution, NDC and FDC. As it was noted in the concept note for today's conference, NDC pension plans have been successfully implemented in many countries, including Poland, Sweden, Norway, and some other countries. That is true, but nevertheless, it is worth noting that Polish opinion polls, despite the defined contribution pension plans' objective advantages like simplicity and transparency, show that Polish society perceives the defined benefit pension plans as a fair and desirable pension plan. Only 25% of Poles believe that the pension amount should depend on the amount of contributions paid, while nearly 70% believe it should depend only on the length of service and earnings during the most profitable years of economic life. More than 25 years after pension reform based on DC pension plan, Poles still adore defined benefit pension plans and are convinced that this pension plan, despite being less transparent and harder to understand, guarantees a fair pension. I think this poses a significant challenge for the discussion about the defined contribution pension plans. As a politician, I would say that this opinion polls really concerns me, and because what I would like to highlight, I am sure that every pension system works only when the society accepts this pension system and understand the rules that it is based on. You will also discuss the pros and cons of DFDC, a pension plans that relies heavily on individual foresight, ownership, and faith in financial markets. As a left-wing politician, I would like to frankly say that I have no faith in financial markets, and I strongly believe that elements of pension system based on individual foresight and profits from financial transactions should be kept to a minimum. However, I don't want to leave you with my political views in this discussion, because this is scientific discussion, not political. But I would like to refer again to the research. Qualitative studies conducted across all age groups in Polish society on perceptions and expectations of the pension system reveal one rule: the closer to retirement age, the greater the belief the individual foresight is impossible to secure in old age. According to all the respondents, a state-guaranteed pension based on the principle established by the state should be the primary form of security in old age. And while market solutions are economically attractive, we must remember that society, considering retirement, society expects certainty and peace of mind, which financial markets never provide. Thank you for the invitation, and I wish you good discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Paweł Jaroszek, the Deputy President of Social Security Institution.
Morning, ladies. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this conference. It's a pity that Mr. Derejczyk couldn't be with us, but he's really ill. So let me say a few words about what we are thinking about the condition of NDC, especially condition of ZUS, and which is very interesting about the pension system in Poland from the ZUS perspective. I will switch into Polish, and please,
I will be
you'll be my translator. System emerytalny przestał być konstrukcją statyczną, musi działać jak mechanizm automatycznej stabilizacji wobec demografii i rynku pracy.
The pension system ceased to be a static construct. It must act as a mechanism of automatic stabilization against the demographic changes in the labor market.
Publiczna część systemu emerytalnego ma z definicji zapewnić jedynie podstawowy poziom świadczeń po przejściu na emeryturę. Poziom ten jest zwykle niższy od oczekiwań i potrzeb emerytów.
The public part of the pension system should, by definition, ensure the basic income after retirement. This level is usually lower than expected and lower than needs of the pensioners. The benefits from the pension system,
Świadczenia z systemu traktowane jako całość mogą zostać jednak podwyższone przy wykorzystaniu wszystkich elementów formalnego i nieformalnego zabezpieczenia emerytalnego.
The benefits from the pension system as a whole can be definitely increased with using different formal and non-formal elements of social insurance and pension insurance and pension security.
To jest przez większą liczbę dzieci, które w przyszłości będą finansować konsumpcję rodziców, dziadków w ramach systemu emerytalnego oraz transferów wewnątrzrodzinnych.
That is working on fertility, which we will also refer to later, which in the future will finance the consumption of their parents and grandparents as a part of their contributions to the pension system, but also intra-family transfers.
Późniejsze rozpoczęcie, czyli opóźnienie pobierania świadczeń.
Postponing retirement decisions and extending working lives.
A także dodatkowe oszczędzanie zwiększające skalę indywidualnej lokacji dochodu z okresu aktywności na okres pobierania świadczeń na emeryturze.
Individual savings that increase the individual consumption smoothing between the periods of economic activity to the periods of retirement.
Warto podkreślić, że nie tylko w skali Polski, Europy czy nawet całego świata demografia jest nowym stanem rozchwianej równowagi.
It is worth to underline that not only in Poland, but also in the European and the world context, the demographic processes are in the new state of sort of unstable equilibrium.
Starzenie się populacji to trwała zmiana strukturalna, a nie tylko szok przejściowy.
Population aging is a structural change and not a transitory shock.
Zatem kluczowe wyzwanie to malejąca relacja pracujących do świadczeniobiorców, a nie sam poziom wydatków na świadczenia emerytalne.
Therefore, the main challenge is the falling ratio between working people and pensioners, not the level of pension expenditure per se.
Bardzo ważna jest rola instytucji publicznych, takich jak chociażby Zakład Ubezpieczeń Społecznych, które przestają być wyłącznie płatnikiem świadczeń, a stają się dostawcą informacji, operatorem systemu danych, a także aktorem wpływającym na decyzje jednostek.
And the role of public institutions such as social insurance institutions and social insurance institutions at large, they cease to be only the payers of benefits. They also provide information, they manage data systems, they also influence retirement behaviors.
NDC definiuje jasno zmienne niezależne, wiek emerytalny, długość życia i zmienne zależne, dodatkowe oszczędzanie na emeryturę, indywidualną decyzję o przejściu na emeryturę.
Notional defined contribution systems define clearly the independent variables such as retirement age and life expectancy, but also dependent variables such as additional pension savings and individual decision when to retire.
To bardzo ważne, bo przenosi to poziom napięcia z poziomu polityki na poziom indywidualnych wyborów.
It is very important because it actually shifts the locus from the policy level to the level of individual choices.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and wish you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And right now I would like to invite Anna Pettersson Westerberg, Director General of Swedish Pensions Agency, to present her welcome remarks.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can stand here. Okay. So, distinguished professors, colleagues, and guests, it's a great honor for me to stand here in front of you and to have the speech of the 4th NDC Conference. I feel so privileged to address an audience as knowledgeable as you are about pensions and especially about the NDC schemes. My understanding is that if there is anything you, dear audience, don't know about pension, it's not worth knowing actually. And some of you have also been involved in developing and making this fantastic innovation of NDC pensions come to us. So I would actually ask you to please join me in this celebration of you founding fathers and mothers of these systems in a warm applause. I think you really deserve it. So here come the applause. I'm very much looking forward to these 2 days that we have ahead of us. I believe that we all agree that we are more or less a bit proud of these NDC systems and schemes. And I think that's because these designs of these systems are in some way maybe superior to other pension systems, primarily because they combine the financial stability and a clear incentive to work with the fairness that comes with the lifetime income principle, the long-term sustainability, and also without the constant political interference into these systems. So, and by designing them, working with them, and evaluating them, I think we have created a financially robust pension system that provides economic security, welfare and prosperity for millions of retirees in our countries, and that's a great value. We face, on the contrary to this, many challenges in our NDC systems in our different countries. Sweden definitely has challenges, and I will tell you more in the next session about what we have challenged during the last 10 years when it comes to the pension system. And I would love to hear more about your challenges that you have in your countries. So I think that meeting and learning from each other and our experiences is a key. All the good ideas that we will get from these 2 days at the conference will help us to develop our pension systems. It's a fantastic opportunity to continue to implement wise reforms and to further develop these well-developed long-term pension system that we have in these countries. So, dear friends, as you know, the external influence on our economies and pension systems are changing quite rapidly at the moment. The Swedish NDC pension system was developed in the 90s and was implemented in the 2000s. That's 25 years ago now. Time is passing on very fast. And since these 25 years, the economic, the technological, the demographic trends has changed considerably over the years. And unfortunately, we also have a much tougher geographical, geopolitical, volatile environment at the moment, primarily as a result of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. 25 years ago, we had high growth, strong prospects for the future. We had the 90s crisis behind us, at least in Sweden. Today, I think we are experiencing much more increasing uncertainty about growth, interest rates, and labor supply. Add to that, we also have the AI, the digital transformation. It will also fundamentally transform the labor market, and the way people earn their income. So this will demand reforms of the pension systems and also other security systems, and also the welfare system, as we just discussed here when attending to the conference. So maybe we will have to completely rethink pension systems for the 30s and the 40s that is coming. For instance, what will happen to the lifetime income principle if there are prolonged periods where we don't have any income because of AI and digitalization? Will this lifetime income principle be difficult to hold up, or will it be maybe more important than ever? This would be an interesting issue to discuss for me. But despite all of these challenges, I think I stand before you here today and I can conclude that we need to hold up the systems and the strong institutions which pensions are, and also for the future, because it has served our populations very well. I think the key is to continue to develop and implement new reforms to adapt to a world and as it stands today. I think it's crucial for the success of pensions. And that's why I think this conference is so important. It's very nice to have forums like this, where we can discuss these complex issues, examine arguments from all angles, and to use our collective competence in this room, and to find wise, well-balanced, long-term solutions. I am convinced that we will leave this conference in 2 days strengthened in our conviction that we must continue to develop our robust NDC systems in order to provide economic security, welfare, and prosperity for millions of retirees in our countries. So thank you for your attention and good luck for this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like right now to invite Marek, Góra, and Michał Rutkowski to join me here so that we could guide you a bit through what will happen during the next 2 days. I would also like to mention one person which is unfortunately not present here today, but was very much of a spirit both of the national defined contribution reforms, but also NDC conferences, which is Professor Edward Palmer, who unfortunately, due to family reasons, could not join us today, but he's definitely with us in his thoughts, and he will be contributing to the further developments related to what will happen after the conference, which we will also be discussing later on. I would also like to thank Robert Holzmann and the World Bank team for all the discussions and support during the preparation for the conference, because it's been a continuing activity that all of us have been involved also in Rome and in Stockholm and in Sandham, going backwards. And as it has been mentioned, NDC systems and pension systems suffer multiple challenges, and I think we will all here discuss those a little bit. I would like, as a demographer, to point out that population aging is a phenomenon that indeed evolved over the past quarter of the century. So we do see that the demographic change becomes more and more profound source of concern for pension systems, and not only pension systems. And to that end, national defined contribution systems are responding to some of the challenges, but not all of them. And we need to really think about how social security in general, but also public policies, need to be seen together as a sort of a continuous package that will enable to ensure that in the future pensioners receive, as I have mentioned, adequate and stable pensions. We will also discuss various aspects related to functioning of the pension systems, legal development, systemic development, and which we do hope will contribute to the overall conclusion how we can progress with promoting the national pension systems in the future, how we can think about this being a solution that can be potentially adopted also in other countries as these demographic challenges, as I have mentioned, indeed are becoming more and more important. And let me right now pass the floor to Marek Góra.
Okay, thank you, Agnieszka. Well, I'm really happy you're all here. You know, that's the great success. And well, this is the fourth conference after the first three, which were really successful. I hope the one we are starting today will be at least as successful as the previous ones. However, it could be a bit different, so we will see. That depends on a way we will discuss the issues of the non-financial defined contribution system or systems in a broad picture of social policies and pension systems in general. And this large perspective, together with our specific focus on NDC, is something we would like to continue today. And as Agnieszka mentioned, Ed Palmer is not with us. He had to stay for family reasons at Stockholm, and we really miss his presence here. It would be much better if we can do the whole thing together with him. Well, the conference. I would like to focus a couple of issues to be kept at the back of our minds. It's my suggestion. First is, well, NDC did not exist in the 20th century. Well, this is a kind of phenomenon that appeared recently. Well, this 25 years is quite a long period, but still, well, it's a new arrangement, new in comparison to other arrangements we may apply in pensions, in social security. And NDC did not exist that time because it was hardly implementable that time. So information technology, on one hand, was not sufficiently developed, and on the other hand, NDC was not really needed because of the demographic transition not being completed that time. So the demographic dividend fueled public finance, helping to finance all the problems. So, well, that was totally different demographic landscape. And that difference is to be remembered. Well, we are in the 21st century, and in the developed countries, we have completed the demographic transition. And this development does not matter so much. What matters is that the demographic transition is behind us. So we are in a totally different demographic situation, and demography is the key factor behind pension systems. So that was my first comment. The second one is that, well, actually, we can think of longer working careers, which is the great idea. But on the other hand, we know that that is very demanding. It's demanding on the policy side. So, well, we all know that societies are strongly against longer activities. So, well, attempts to increase retirement age are hated. We have a lot of examples of countries and politicians who tried, who failed, and probably they had to change their professions because of that. So imagine we are able to increase the pension age by 10, 15 years. Would we meet here today? Of course not. The problems will be really, really minor. We would discuss details, not the essential elements of pension systems. But in countries that have not completed the demographic transition yet, the need for NDC is much weaker. Well, they can still manage without NDC. So NDC is not designed for developed countries, but it's strongly applicable in developed countries while being just an option in countries that have not completed the demographic transition yet. So we may use the term developed countries, but it's a kind of correlation. What matters is the demographic transition. Well, going on, discussions on NDC can be understood as a kind of, or in general, NDC can be understood as a kind of clever policy trick to solve some of the problems of pension systems. And I think that NDC is much more, and at least for us in this room, it is much more. It is a kind of an intellectual concept that helps us to think of new ideas that can be applicable in the new demographic situation. So it's a new idea, just interesting and so on. This is the idea that helps to solve the problem, not to solve, attempt to solve the problem of what to do with this reversed demographic pyramid. So in the 20th century, we had many young, few old, and the old lived short. Today, everything is upside down. So shall we still apply the old good methods or think of how to change them? And of course, we may reform this or modernize that traditional methods, which is actually going on. But on the other hand, we may jump into the 21st century and think of new ideas which do not reflect the reality of the 20th century and being adjusted to the 21st century. Let's think of something that is designed just to the 21st century. And this is the goal I would like to suggest for us for these 2 days of our conference. And I hope, we'll analyzing pros and cons of NDC, which of course is not perfect because nothing is perfect, but discussing that pros and cons can help us to go ahead. And the last thing is that words matter. Changing ideas require also changing the way in which we apply words, terms, terminology, because we must understand each other. If we apply terms from century ago, then we are a bit lost. We use terms and we know we mean something else, but well, it's much better to refresh our vocabulary. And it's also good for public promotion of new systems, because people still think in terms of the previous system. As Mr. Gajewski said, well, they are strongly for the previous system. Why? Partially because we communicate the new one in a way which is not understandable for them. The new one is easy to understand, but people tend to think in terms of their previous habits. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start where Anna started, because Anna reminded me of that revolutionary period when Sweden, Latvia, Poland were reforming their pension schemes. And indeed, a bit in the spirit of what Marek talked about, we at the time had very, very high hopes. And we believe that something what we are designing is completely new. It is, at that time, it wasn't that we thought that way for 21st century, but it was certainly new. We were very proud of it. We were arguing that NDC system, non-financial defined contributions, is better than anything else. It's better than traditional pay-as-you-go DB, because of the hidden redistribution, not always justified in pay-as-you-go DB. We believed it is better than the point system, because point system is like driving a car with the hood open, when you can manipulate the system by changing the value of the point. Whereas in NDC, we close the hood. You cannot be manipulated. and so on and so forth. And of course, the micro incentives, the increases in pensions, if you retire at 63, not 62, or 68, not 67, huge high hopes. And then no transition costs, because if you do FDC, then you have transition costs. With NDC, you don't need to have them. Of course, we all thought of FDC as well. I think despite what Minister Gajewski said earlier, some of us still have hope that there is a room for financial market to deliver on social protection in a proper, controlled way by the state. And many of you would remember that Polish pension reform was called security through diversity, because NDC and FDC together were seen as a good pair because they are not dependent exactly on the same factors. You keep your eggs in different baskets. So now, fast forwarding to 2026, my job is a bit set the stage for the conference, so I wanted to mention two things. First is what has not happened and we had expected it to happen. And I would say that there are two things which I would label. One I would call vertical deepening, and the other I would call horizontal expansion. I start with horizontal expansion, it's easier. We thought more countries would adopt NDC. We have now Sweden, Poland, Latvia, Norway, Italy, but it's still in different formats. But at that time, had I been asked this question, I probably would have answered, wait 5-6 years, you'd see most of Europe have NDC. That hasn't happened. Vertical deepening, by that I mean that we had very high hopes about the incentives created by the system. I already mentioned these increases in pension when we retire 1 year later, but we also believe it will be a huge advantage NDC for labor force participation at different ages. At very young age, because your contributions matter, at a very old age, because your pension increases. I would say vertical deepening did not happen the way we thought it would. So it's beautiful in 2026 to sit together and to think, why hasn't it happened? Is it because the hopes were not justified at the outset? Or is it something went wrong with implementation? And I don't have an answer to those questions, but having you in the room, we will find answers to your question, to that question. Finally, in addition to debating whether horizontal expansion or the vertical deepening are really, why haven't they happened, there is something which was also mentioned by Anna earlier today, which is that the world around us changes and changes very quickly. Anna talked quite a lot about AI. I wanted to point out to the fact that even before AI, before ChatGPT started amazing people in 2022, it was already then clear that labor markets are more and more fluid. The platform work, a lack of stable employment contracts, non-typical employment contracts. This is a new reality of the world. And that obviously opens a question, how does NDC fit into that picture? How you do NDC when there is no stable lifetime employment, when you switch jobs or switch countries? And again, I would obviously argue NDC is ideal for that, because it's defined contribution, you carry your pension rights, whatever you do, as long as you keep paying, it's good. But an opposite argument is often run that this fluidity precisely needs a system that allows you for not contributing and still getting your pension, because you will not be able to contribute for a sufficient time to get a decent pension. Finally, I think I am very happy to see in the program topics that are not directly related to NDC, but where NDC plays an important role, which is migration. Migration is inevitable. It will be growing in the world, so debating whether it's good or bad is besides the point. But then how does NDC influence migration? How does migration is made easier and more productive in the present presence of NDC, and several other economic, cultural, and social topics which we will be discussing. So I very much look forward to being with you for those 2 days, and thank you so much for coming to Warsaw. Thank you.
And with that, we close the opening session, and I would like to invite Professor Maciej Rutkowski, who will chair the part 1 session on stocktaking of the relevant pension reform and non-reform experiences.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maciej Rutkowski. I come from Poznań University of Economics and Business, a similar institution to the Warsaw School of Economics located in Poznań. I have a real honor and pleasure to moderate the first session. The title of the session is Stocktaking of Relevant Pension Reform and Non-Reform Experiences. The session should really set the scene for the whole conference, should be something like a fundament for the whole conference. We will have 4 topics of 7 authors, plus discussion. The organizers have asked all of us, all the moderators, to reserve at least 15 minutes for discussion. My role will be introducing speakers. I will do it very, very briefly for several reasons. The first is obviously the time is very limited, but the second one, the speakers are very well known in the whole conference, but especially at this session. And finally, you will find the CVs in the conference folder. My second role will be the most unpleasant one, but probably the most important one, will be to keep an eye on the time. Sorry in advance for interrupting you or limiting your presentations. I will then finally try to facilitate discussion. I will limit my comments, my talks very much. A lot has been said already. During the introduction. So we have less than 2 hours now for 4 presentations. Let us start with the first one, which is called Taking Stock of NDC Developments in the World. We will have 3 short presentations, altogether 23 minutes maybe, so something like 7-8 minutes each of you. I know that all of you have also different roles during the conference. Some of you already had a role during the introduction. So I will introduce the 3 speakers now very briefly, and then ask individually to present their presentations. The speakers come from the 3 countries which have introduced NDCs. So we will start with Anna Pettersson Westerberg, Director General of the Swedish Pensions Agency. Then I will ask Vincenzo Galasso, Professor of Economics at Bocconi University, and finally Agnieszka Chłoń-Domińczak, Professor and Vice Rector of Warsaw School of Economics. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If we have my presentation, it's a PDF. Yeah.
It's in PDF, right?
Okay. Distinguished professors, colleagues, guests, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about the Swedish pension system. Can I switch slides with this one?
Let's check it out.
Yeah, okay, we just start. Okay, a very short, brief reminder of the Swedish pension system of an overview. It typically consists of 3 pillars. See if we can have the presentation here. Yeah. Now, okay. Public pension is the first pillar. Income pension, it's the orange part. And then we have the occupational pension schemes, which are the blue part. And we have private pension savings, the third pillar. It's a green part, very small part in Sweden at the moment. First pillar, the income pension. As you can see, it's 18.5% of the contribution of the income. 16% goes to the income pension, the notional defined contribution pay-as-you-go system, based on individual accounts, lifetime incomes. Every krona counts as a registered pension right up to earning ceiling, indexed by development of average income, you can say. We have 2.5% contribution goes then to the premium pension system, which is a defined contribution pre-funded system based on individual accounts. Then over 90% of the population in Sweden also have occupational pension schemes. Sorry, now I lost my slide here.
I forgot about our online audience, sorry.
Sorry, I have to just share so that they can see and understand. Okay, the occupational pension schemes are also covering basically the whole population. It's about 4.5% to 6.2% of salary. Above the ceiling, it's 30 to 32% of the contributions. Then we have a private savings system. It's a very small system, basically abolished for the employed, but small system for the self-employed. Also guarantee pension and basic pensions. I would like to use my 7 minutes or something, to say something about the last 10 years. What has been the challenges? And it's been difficult to select, but I've taken 4 challenges with us so that we can say something. Just to say also, on an overall basis, the pension system has remained financially stable. But there's been a recurring debate, ongoing question is the pension system providing pension levels which are high enough? Are the pensions too low? That's basically the debate for 10 years. So there are 4 different reforms, either implemented or ongoing, to meet that kind of challenge. The first thing is to increase the retirement age. The second thing is to make a review of the basic income. Third, higher contributions. And fourth, the speeding mechanism. It's basically an enhanced indexation over this average income indexation. Just to give you an overview then, the raised retirement age, I would say it may be the most important reform that's been taken part. This is the problem. No doubt, the increasing life expectancy has been a fantastic success, but it's been increasing much, much more than the retirement age. And as you can see, there's a gap in this chart. This means it's enormous pressure on the pension system. This is the key driver to the reform in the 90s, I would say. So that the increasing life expectancy and lower economic growth, they put pressure on the previous defined benefit system that we used to have. And clearly demonstrated it was financially unstable. Instead, we created a system where pension rates automatically decline if the retirement age is not increased, in line with the life expectancy. And this is the core principle of the reform from the 90s. This, as you can see, the life expectancy has been increasing even further. Today, average life expectancy in Sweden is 82 for men and 85 for women. So the gap between the retirement age and life expectancy has also further widened. And this is why we had to reform the retirement ages. In practice, we have raised 3 retirement ages at the same time. First is the minimum age of claiming benefits, it's the red line. And the second is the minimum age for claiming guaranteed pensions, you know, the basic pensions. It's the blue line. And the third pension age that's been raised is the right to remain in the workforce under the Employment Protection Act, and that's the green line. So from 2019 to 26, the age have been raised in incremental steps. And from this year, 26, it's been indexed with the life expectancy. And it's 2/3 of the life expectancy is being used for raising the retirement age. And 1/3 is free time to do what you want, spare time. And it's important to say that these retirement ages is not mandatory for those except for the minimum age and also for those with a guarantee pension. For all others, this is just a nudge. This is just a recommendation from the state to work longer. So it's very interesting to see how does it work. This was the development during the 2000 and 2010. And as you can see, the effective retirement age was basically stable or even declining. The introduction of this reform changed the scene. So the retirement age significantly, and this is the effective retirement age, has increased tremendously during the last years. And according to our projection and studies, and I can recommend you to read them, we also see a behavioral effect of those not affected. So the nudge seems to work. This is also means high pensions, of course. 3 to 5% on average increase in the compensation rates for each year the pension age is increasing. So it's been a huge difference for us. Then we have the basic pension. This is our second challenge. We have a guaranteed pension, but there's also a number of other basic pensions in the Swedish system. I won't go through this chart, but I want to make 2 points of it. The first is it's extremely complicated. Not even my very talented colleagues at the agency can explain all the details and how do they function together. It's so hard for retirees to understand what's ongoing. My second point is, have a look at the black line in this chart. One is with tax. This is the average pension level for different income levels and salary. And as you can see, it's basically flat for a very long period. So there is no incentives to work in the Swedish pension system up to quite a high income level. So this is the second problem we have. Third point, raised contribution rates. This has been discussed very much. We have had an investigation to raise the contribution rates. You know, we have a fixed contribution rate, but this has not been the case. The inquiry said no, wait for the higher retirement age to get higher pensions instead. But what's actually happened is that the social partners has raised the contribution rates in the occupational pension schemes. Basically from 3.5% when I started to work with pension in the 90s to 6.5% or 6.3% 2026. Last but not least, I'll speed up with the speeding mechanism here. You know, we have a balancing mechanism in our system which cuts the indexation if the pension system is not stable enough. Now we are introducing, and it's a decision this year, to introduce a speeding mechanism. What it basically means is that we have had large surpluses. We have buffer funds in our NDC pay-as-you-go system, and it has increased enormously. If you see for 26, it's 17% surplus, and this basically means 1,700 billion Swedish crowns or 170 billion euros in a surplus in the system, and it's just growing. So there's been a decision to put a speeding mechanism, and that means that we are introducing a higher level of indexation, a faster indexation than the average income, just to give this money away. Unfortunately, this year, which is election year in Sweden, the level is 115. If you go above 115, we start to send out money to the pensioners and to the pension savers. But this year it won't be. So there's a huge disappointment among politicians in Sweden. I just want to show this chart as well. Sorry, it's so important. What happens if you don't do this speeding mechanism? And we have done hundreds of projections and so many analyses of the colleagues. This is a description of the balancing mechanism and how much the surplus would be. If we don't have it, and this is just the intervals of the projections, you can see that we would end up with a fully funded NDC system. So we wouldn't have to take in any contributions to be able to pay out pensions in the future if we don't have this speeding mechanism. So it's a good situation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anna. And now I would like to ask Vincenzo, and again, sorry in advance, 7 minutes. When I saw the program, I thought it would be a mission impossible. And I'm not Tom Cruise, but I will try to do my best in the interest of the conference. So 7 minutes.
Thank you. I'll try to be on time, even though I have to say that Italy has a tradition of changing the pension system. I think we change the pension system more often than we go to the World Cup, I can say now. All right, so as I said, there have been quite a few changes in the Italian pension system over the last 30 years. So I just want to say a couple of things on this slide. So first of all, the introduction took place with the Dini reform in 1995, as you all know. Now, ever since that, there's been basically a tightening of the different measures. I mean, one of the thing that actually happened in Italy in 1995, which was different from the other country, was this very gradual transition. So basically, many people were unaffected by the reform. If you had 18 years of contribution, by the end of December 1995, you were completely out of the reform. And this had clearly a very clear political economy, if you want, sort of motivation, basically, and there are lots of calculation. People who was 44 or above basically were completely screened from the reform. Then things have changed over time, and so basically, I would say that up until 2010, there have been tightening. Then, of course, there's been the famous Fornero reform that took place in 2011. I should say that, again, I mean, this has happened in Italy. Oftentimes, reform have taken place right after financial crisis, and so that was like a need for reform. Now, what happened here was basically that, I mean, lots of things happened, but I think the most relevant thing to some extent is the extension of the NDC to all workers. So this transition period was cut down like very drastically. Now, having said that, I mean, I have to say that ever since like the mid 2010, there has been a sort of a pushback from this. And the pushback has come from the fact that for several reasons, including, of course, a change in incentives, basically retirement age has been going up. And this has, starting from 2016, has actually pushed back quite a lot from a political and a union viewpoint, but also from the firms. So as usual, there's been this sort of like conventio ad excludendum, so like all together, but the public, but the public deficit, if you want. So firms, unions, they actually push back quite a lot in terms of trying to increase, to actually allow for flexibility. And here there's been a season of reforms which were all quotas, so like, you know, different combination for people to actually exit earlier. Now, the most relevant thing is that this was really like a big change in a notional defined contribution system that does allow for early retirement, but with actually a fair reduction in the pension system. So here, but what happened was that basically, at least in the first two, you could retire early and you didn't actually have to pay any penalty for that. And so that was like, in a way, changing entirely, if you want, the idea behind the system. Now, I think this, and the other thing that actually was this temporary suspension of the life expectancy adjustment, so the fact that retirement age actually used to increase with the increase in life expectancy. So those things, I think, are very relevant because they tell you that at some stage there could be a sort of a pushback, even in an NDC system, which, as was discussed earlier, should have in itself the sort of ability to be politically neutral, because actually these things just go on automatically, but not necessarily. So when the pushback is actually strong, things may happen. And I think this is what the lesson that we can learn from it. Now, having been part of the, having been economic counselor at the time of in 2017, we actually tried to do something which was to allow for early retirement on with a very different scheme, which was actually sort of like allowing people to borrow against their future pension rights on the market. And that was a complicated scheme, so it was like some sort of like decentralization, but that didn't really work out, because then in 2018, actually, quota 100 came in. It was much easier. It was super generous, and then basically, but of course, it was basically against, if you want, the public budget in a way. All right, so let me turn to what I think has happened and what is relevant. So one thing, I'm going to show you this graph also later today. I mean, a similar graph also later today. So this is a graph that also, it's very close to what Anna has shown before, showing that basically countries that have an NDC system have seen this picture of like retirement age going down up until the mid-90s and then bouncing back. However, and as I'm going to say also later on, this is not only true for NDC countries. This is true overall. And in fact, you can see that this is actually, I think probably Greece is the only country where this has been going down for longer, but for most other countries, it has been going up. And so the reason for this sort of like, if you want, kind of a pushback against reform, I think is entirely driven by these things. Now, let me also show you another picture, which is very famous in Italy, and this is like the public spending, pension spending as a ratio to GDP, and you see that basically the idea is that, you know, Italy is going to go up the hill, but then down the hill basically over time. This is a very famous graph, has been around for quite a long time. Now let me tell you a little bit where this is coming from, though, because I think this tells us where the problem are going to be in the near future. Actually, not so near, maybe, but so this is coming from basically different things. So the first thing is population, it's clearly aging. So, you know, this is the percentage of people aged 70 plus over those aged 20 to 69. And you see that basically this is going and then pretty much stabilizing. Okay, so that's the first thing. So this is the demography, if you want. Then this is the activity rate by sex and gender in sex and age. Sorry, in gender and age in the different in Italy again. And the underlying idea here is basically that people are going to work much longer. You see the difference between these two things. So the underlying assumption is that people are going to work way longer age. But what it's scary in a way is this here. This is the average pension as a ratio of the worker productivity, and this is going down. So what this is telling you is that at the end of the day, what will happen is that the financial sustainability of the system will probably be there, but people will retire with very low pensions, even though they will eventually work for longer years. And so one way or another, this will end up being a political problem. And so even though we thought like 30 years ago that this NDC system would completely screen from politics, I think we'll have to think twice about this. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you very much. And now, finally, in this presentation, under this topic, Agnieszka Chłoń-Domińczak.
So as I was the one that sort of imposed this kind of a 7-minute regime for the presentations, but we thought it would be good from the beginning that we have this very brief presentation of what is going on in the countries that implemented the NDC reforms. And right now I have to... Okay, works. A very brief description of what happened in Poland. As you have heard, in 1999, we introduced the security through diversity pension reform. So we basically moved to non-financial and financial defined contributions. And while the basic assumption of the system that it is based on defined contribution principle stayed, we first faced the gradual erosion and final reversal of the financial defined contribution component. In 2011, after the crisis, the contribution to FDC was sharply reduced and more flows were redirected to social security institutions, to sub-accounts, which are also non-financial defined contribution accounts with different indexation than the basic non-NDC accounts in Poland. In 2014, there was a major rollback of FDC, the basically renationalization of assets invested in the government bond. So this was also a part of sort of moving more towards NDC from the financial contributions. The other important part of our changes were changes into the retirement age, which have been already mentioned to some extent, and I will also present the outcoming developments related to the actual retirement ages. In 2012, the government decided to gradually increase retirement age to 67 for both men and women. But in 2017, the following government decided to reverse this change and go back to 60 for men and 65 for women. So contrary to Sweden, when there's the discussion of how to increase retirement age, in Poland, we basically hear politicians from all sides of political parties that we will not change the legal pensionable age. We need to encourage people to work longer. It's not a very easy task. Finally, we've also worked on various minimum pension and social security instruments. So the minimum pension was revalued a few times more than the regular indexation, but also we introduced lump sum bonuses of the 13th and 14th pension. They are actually not financed from the social security contributions, but from the state budget. But nevertheless, they provide additional income for pensioners, especially those with lower pensions. We also introduced a tax relief for pensioners and PIT zero incentive. So this is basically, again, an encouragement for people to work longer. If they don't retire, they can basically pay no or very little personal income tax after they reach the legal retirement age and work. So these were sort of the developments in the mandatory part of the pension system. In the area of voluntary savings, subsequent mechanisms were introduced, the individual retirement accounts, the individual retirement protection account. So the two types of privately funded with individual decision savings instruments that can help developing individual savings, as it was mentioned by President Jaroszek earlier. In 2019, we introduced the employee capital plans, which are an auto-enrollment mechanism, which also boosts savings. However, despite incentives, the coverage and the contribution levels remain limited, with exceptions of PPKs, which become more and more popular. This also means that the risk of old age income inequality and poverty remains high, especially if we keep the very low retirement age of women. So the resulting pension system that we have as of now is that we have dominant non-financial defined contribution with, however, low statutory pension age, which we will be discussing later on, marginalized FDC, but also a very reduced trust towards long-term rules. People were surprised with the changes in the FDC, and when we talk to people, very many, they actually say that we don't have a trust in long-term savings instruments. There's a growing reliance on minimum pensions and ad hoc supplements, especially those 13th and 14th pensions, rising adequacy risk, especially of those who contribute less or contribute for the shorter period of time, which is also mentioned by international assessments. A few slides on the pension system development very shortly, as following what also Vincenza showed. What happened in Poland in the course of, let's say, mid-1990s until now is that our overall pension expenditure, as you can see, relative to GDP remained relatively stable, even with a slight decline. However, it was mainly related to the fact that we spent less on disability pensions. If we look at the old age pensions only, we see that these expenditure increased from around 6% to 8% of GDP. This is only the employee pension system. So this is the NDC pension system covering most of the workers in Poland. We don't speak about the farmers' pension system, which is separate. When we look at the pensionable ages and the actual retirement ages, as I have mentioned, that was a long story of increasing and then reversing the increase of the retirement ages, but also what is worth mentioning, in 2009, we also removed a possibility to retire early from the general pension system, especially for those people that have longer working careers. We keep the system of bridging pensions for people working in special conditions. However, as you can see here on this picture, from 2009, the actual retirement age, which are those solid lines for both men and women, started to increase quite significantly. So that was a very sharp reform. Then in 2012, with the introduction of this gradual increase of retirement ages, it also started to increase. And then from 2017, we saw sort of flattening out of retirement behavior. So women in Poland retire slightly above age of 60, and men in Poland retire at around age of 65. If we look at the evolution in the number of pensioners, currently we have around 9 million of pensioners, including more than 6 million of those who receive pensions from social old age pensions. An interesting information is when we look at the inflows of pensioners, which tend to concentrate with significant reforms. So with the removal of early retirement, everybody claimed pensions because they didn't believe that they will still have their pension rights after 2009. And then in 2017, after the reversal, there was also an increase in the number of pensions claiming pensions. Right now, it is demography. And finally, last but not least, when we look at the old age projections, as you can see, with the changes that we have and with the system that we have, depending on the scenario, we will have our pension expenditure ranging around 9-10% of GDP. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you, Agnieszka. After this wonderful overview of the developments in the 3 countries which have introduced NDCs, now we move to the second topic. And the second topic is NDCs as a part of a complex old age pension system. And I would like to ask Nicholas Barr, Professor of Public Economics at the London School of Economics. Nick, the floor is yours. And again, 22, 23 minutes would be perfect. Okay.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here among so many friends, but it's also a particular pleasure to be back in Warsaw. I was first here in November 1989, when Warsaw was dark and cold and there was nothing much in the shop windows. So to see the change over the years has been absolutely fantastic. One thing that I regard as bittersweet, at the time I was here then, our Polish friends envied my British passport, which was a European passport, and now, given the insanity of Brexit, I now envy my Polish friends their Polish passport, which is a European passport. So much for progress. Right. What I'm going to talk about today is based on joint work with Peter Diamond. The book we've been working on for far too long, an object lesson for young academics of how not to do it. The book's got 5 parts. Part 1 is introductory theory. Part 2 is why governments need to be involved. Part 3 is the design of different pension plans. But pension plans don't exist in a vacuum, as we've seen this morning. They need to adjust over time. So part 4 is about adjusting pension plans, mainly focusing on automatic adjustment. And part 5 says sometimes, very often, you don't just think about plans, you have to think about the pension system as a whole. So I'm going to be talking about part 5 this morning, and Peter, when he talks after lunch, is going to be talking about part 4. So plans and systems. Important distinction. Pension systems have different elements, a non-contributory element, an NDC element, or some other device for consumption smoothing. And since pensions have multiple objectives, a well-designed system generally has multiple plans, such as a non-contributory basic pension plus individual accounts. And the central message is to avoid the common error of tunnel vision in pension analysis. In other words, focusing excessively on one part of a pension system. So it's important when looking at a plan to look at the rest of the pension system, but for many purposes, it's also important to look at wider policies such as the availability or not of good insurance to cover things like medical expenses and long-term care. So let me start with a simple example. About 2 years ago in England, when people had a medical emergency and phoned for an ambulance, there was a very long wait, up to 8 hours. So what did the government do? It bought more ambulances. Wrong solution. Why was there a long wait for ambulances? Answer, because ambulances were queued up outside the emergency room because there wasn't a bed in the emergency room so that the patient could be transferred from the ambulance to the emergency room. Why wasn't there a bed in the emergency room? Because they couldn't discharge people who needed to be admitted to hospital onto a hospital bed because all the beds were full. Why were the beds full? Because there were a lot of older people who were clinically well enough to be discharged if social care was available to look after them, but there wasn't enough social care. So that was what's known as the backdoor problem. Hospitals couldn't discharge patients. There was also a front door problem that people couldn't get to see their family doctor, so they phoned an online advice service, which, like any well-designed algorithm, erred on the side of caution and referred people to the emergency room who, if they'd been able to see their family doctor, wouldn't have happened. So what you needed to do was not buy more ambulances, but expand social care and family doctors. And that's a graphic example of a systems approach. So pensions fill multiple objectives. I needn't go through them with this audience. But to show how they play out, consider 2 countries, and each of them has a non-contributory plan and DC individual accounts. So poverty relief will be greater in a system with a relatively higher non-contributory plan. Consumption smoothing will be greater, relatively greater, in the country with a larger defined contribution plan. Risk facing each member will be lower. The larger is the non-contributory element relative to the DC element, and vice versa. Incentives will vary depending on whether the non-contributory pension is subject to an income test, as in Canada, or to a pension test, as in Sweden, or there's no test at all, as in the Netherlands. And finally, intergenerational distribution will be different depending on the relative size of the 2 plans, one of which is funded, the other not. So the point is, a lot of these issues, you really need to look at the system as a whole. So another example, recognizing caring activities. Caring for children has a cost. If one parent, typically the mother, stays at home, some of that cost will fall on her pension. And the question is, how do you recognize those extra costs of children? Well, you can do it at the time of caring through child benefit or subsidized childcare, or you can do it later through pension credits. So child benefit and policies to assist paid work help when the family's young and needs the money. Pension credits recognize some of the costs of caring through later benefits. And the system dimension is that the case for pension credits is relatively more important when the pension system pays benefits closer to actuarially fair. So if you have an NDC pension where in principle, if a woman misses out on years of earnings, she will get a lower pension. That strengthens the case for pension credits. Whereas if you imagine a country with a very large non-contributory pension and only a small NDC pension, then the case for pension credits is much weaker. So that's what I mean when I talk about the importance of a system element. So there are issues around things like the size of the pension system as a whole, which is really an answer to the question, what is an adequate pension? So the mandate for the national plan should be smaller the greater the extent of employer plans, the greater the extent of the country for people to have voluntary saving, and the better the cover provided by medical and long-term care. There's also an issue of how do you decide on the relative size of different plans in a system? And the factors that illustrate that, first of all, the income distribution. Clearly, in a country with a lot of poverty, the poverty relief element will be more important. Poverty relief is more important the less comprehensive the less comprehensive medical insurance is, or income-tested assistance for housing. The coverage of the contributory plan. Better coverage enhances the role of the mandatory contributory plan relative to the non-contributory plan. And there's other aspects like views about families and households, savings propensities, and changes over time. I mean, the relative importance of a poverty relief element can change, for example, if the lower tail of the income distribution becomes less significant or as a defined contribution plan matures. Now, there's also issues about what earliest pension age and whether or not people should have access to pensions before pension age. I'm going to skip those to make sure that I don't overrun my time. Let's talk a bit about rules for drawdown. Two questions. What fraction of their pension wealth should a person annuitize, and what constraints should there be on the drawdown of non-annuitized pension wealth? And let me take those in turn. In some ways, accumulation is a fairly easy problem. What you want is to maximize returns for a given degree of risk. Drawdown is much more difficult because you've got huge diversity in individual preferences and circumstances. So rules need to strike a balance between stopping people annuitizing too little and hence risking outliving their savings. On the other hand, if you force people to annuitize too much, that cuts across other uses of accumulated wealth, bequest motives, etc. So the fraction of pension wealth which a person should convert into annuity depends on individual consumption preferences. It depends on individual bequest motives, and again, it depends on the surrounding system. If you've got good medical insurance, then the case for a greater mandatory degree of annuitization is stronger. The desirability of annuitizing within any plan will depend on how much annuitization is required in any other plans in the system. So the extent of voluntary annuitization in a defined contribution plan should depend on any benefits from a defined benefit plan, which by definition has mandatory annuitization. And I know of a world-famous economist, a name you would all know, who had a very good occupational defined benefit pension. And he cashed in the lot. He was given the option to convert it into a capital sum. And he did so for very sensible reasons, because others in the family had a very good defined benefit pension. And they figured as a family that having the capital would would be more useful. So it does make the point that how much you require people to annuitize is difficult and complex. And if any of you have got a really good answer, please give it to me. There's also the question of what you do about non-annuitized wealth. I mean, one of the many crazy pension reforms that the British government has done in 2014 was to say to people, you don't need to annuitize anymore, was called pension freedom. Now, you may not want to require people to annuitize, but you should give them some sort of guidance about how they draw down. So the insanity was not reducing or eliminating the mandate to annuitize, but it was not giving people guidance. So some countries limit the size of drawdown to protect a person's future benefit. But again, you've got the problem of diversity. So you've got a horrible balance problem. If people are allowed to draw down too fast, that risks poverty in old age, but they may draw down too slowly, which is a very real worry in some countries, hence having lower than necessary consumption in retirement. And the system element in all this is that the desirable constraints on drawdown should take account of mandatory annuitization in other parts of, in other plans in the pension system. And you can give more freedom over speed of drawdown, for example, if a person's non-annuitized wealth is only a small part of the system, as in New Zealand, and vice versa. So many ways to skin a cat. I'm going to go very quickly through some examples of systems. New Zealand has a non-contributory pension subject to tests of age and residence. There's no income or pension or wealth test, but the benefit is subject to income tax. The consumption smoothing element is through KiwiSaver, regulated individual accounts, and then, as in all countries, you've got voluntary individual pension savings. Netherlands, very different system. Got a non-contributory pension subject to an age test. Unusually, once you reach the age and meet the residence test, everyone in the Netherlands gets the full non-contributory pension. So there's no income, pension, or wealth tax. The second element is industry plans, which historically were final salary DB, but have morphed over the years into effectively DC plans with a single fund for each plan, so collective investment, heavily regulated. And then you've got voluntary individual pension savings. Canada has, I said, a non-contributory pension. It's actually got two. It's got one that goes to most Canadians, but is tapered out for the best off Canadians. But there is a second non-contributory pension targeted on low-income Canadians. The second element is the Canada Pension Plan, which is a partially, part of it, the base benefit is a partially funded career average defined benefit plan, approximately 25% funded. There is a second element, which is DB, but is fully funded. Pension age is gradually rising, and there are rules for automatic adjustment. Sweden, you don't need me to tell you about Sweden, everyone knows about that. Yet again, a very different system. One that is less well known, is interesting, is the Canadian province of New Brunswick, which has, it's a risk-sharing career average defined benefit plan. And the way it works is the following. The state government, the provincial government, the trade unions and the employers' organizations got together and agreed on the following, that there would be independent projections at agreed intervals of the health of the fund, that if the fund was in good health, it would be career average DB. If there was a deficit, the rules which were specified and agreed in advance specified 4 levers of adjustment: employer contributions, worker contributions, the accrual rate of future benefits, and indexation of benefits in payment. So if there was a projected deficit, then in the following year, employer contributions might go up, worker contributions might go up, the accrual rates of future benefits may go down, and indexation of benefits in payment may be less than complete. And the rules specify which of these, to what extent, in what order. But crucially, it then contained catch-up. In other words, once the fund's health was restored, these changes could be restored, could be reversed, and all this was specified in the rules in advance. So what you had was something that looked like career average DB, but with small year-to-year wobbles if there was a deficit. So you have something that is a genuine risk-sharing plan, and that's a new and interesting and different design. So where does NDC fit in? Well, as the examples show, there's many ways of organizing consumption smoothing and insurance. DC in the Netherlands, DB with inbuilt adjustment, the Canada pension plan, or a risk-sharing plan. NDC provides consumption smoothing and longevity insurance. It doesn't provide poverty relief. So on its own, it's not a system, it's only part of a system. That's not a criticism, it's just saying NDC is only part of a system. So to complete the system, you need poverty relief. And poverty relief can be done in different ways. You can have a non-contributory pension based only on tests of age and residence, or it could be based on tests of age, residence, and income or pension. So you can have a steep taper, so benefits go only to people with fairly low income or pension. The example of Sweden we saw earlier. You can have a gentle taper that screens out only high earners, as in Chile, or, as I've mentioned in Canada, you can have two, one with a gentle taper and one with a steep taper. How does NDC share risk? Well, it shares the longevity risk, but it can do so within a cohort or across cohorts. Now, Sweden, as I understand it, is unusual in that both annuity pricing and inheritance gains are within a birth cohort, both for death before retirement and after retirement. So, in effect, the Sweden system is a form of tontine. Other countries may price annuities separately for each birth cohort, but inheritance gains typically accrue across the plan as a whole. And you could, in principle, have a system of notional individual accounts with annuities that share risk across cohorts. So, completing the system, first tier, non-contributory pension, there's various designs. If you've got an NDC, a system with an NDC plan, the second tier could be NDC, or it could be another type of earnings-related pension. And then the third tier is voluntary pensions. And so my conclusion is that NDC is a pension design, not the pension design. And listening to what was going on earlier, I've been scribbling some notes. I'm now going to be controversial. There's this nice English expression, putting the cat amongst the pigeons. And I'm going to be controversial because it's going to set things up nicely for a discussion after the next presentation. If you look at NDC and compare it with a defined benefit pension, what have you got? Well, for each of them, you've got a record of the worker's earnings year by year. And what you've got to do is to turn that into a single scalar number, namely the worker's initial pension. Now, if you've got a vector of earnings in different years, and you want to convert that into a scalar, initial benefits, the way you convert a vector into a scalar is through another vector, in other words, a vector of weights. So the real issue is how you weight a worker's earnings in different years. And NDC does it one way, DB does it another way. You can play around with the weights to get them so that they look remarkably similar. But the generic question is, how do you weight a worker's earnings in different years? So that's the first issue. The second issue is how you adjust initial benefits. NDC builds in automatic adjustment in the sense that a worker's initial benefit is lower if the life expectancy of their birth cohort is higher. And it also makes quasi-actuarial adjustments for the age at which a worker first claims benefit. Those are both terrific design features, but they don't have to be specific to NDC. You could build them into a DB plan. And finally, the third issue is whether annuities share risk within a cohort or across cohort. So my thought is there are these generic issues. NDC is a specific manifestation of a way of doing so, but you could have DB plans that look remarkably similar. So the system point, and my going out line, is that for many purposes, NDC needs to be evaluated, not only in its own terms, but also in terms of other plans in the pension system, and importantly, factors outside the pension system, such as the quality or coverage or lack of it of medical insurance and long-term care insurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. We already have a very rich material for discussion, but before we start the discussion, we still have two more presentations, and the next one is called Fair and Transparent Income Allocation. Marek Góra. Ed is not present, so Marek Góra, professor at the London School of Economics. Warsaw School of Economics, sorry. 23 minutes.
Well, speaking after you, Nick, is the challenge for me. You know, for many reasons. But before I start, let me stress that, well, our approaches being different, we share the same social values in our minds. The difference is the methods and our thinking on their efficiency. So this is the difference, not the goals. Goals are the same. We would like to organize a system which would work well for the entire population. Okay, before I start, a couple of issues that should be strongly stated at the very beginning, because in order not to be misled. So we discuss, and that is the kind of approach we try to promote together with Ed Palmer. Well, that due to the population dynamics in developed countries, old age public pension schemes have evolved into mostly income savings and allocation structures. So this is not something that was imposed. This is the reality of the situation. So go back into history to mid-20th century. Some 50% of people entering the labor market, they actually retired. Today, it's 85 or even more in Europe. So this situation is totally different. So without taking that into account at the very beginning of our thinking, well, may mislead us. And the 21st century is fundamentally different from the 20th century. So this is a very strong point of my presentation. So I'm not promoting new ideas for being new. I'm promoting new ideas for being adjusted to the reality of the 21st century. And well, this is my goal. New approaches are needed rather than the reformed old ones. So the term we use is universal public pension scheme. Let me stress that this is universal, covering the entire population. It's public, it's publicly mandated in order to be universal, to cover the entire population. And these two things really matter because we cover the entire population and apply the same rules. This latter is absolutely crucial. And UPPS is strongly different from private pensions. And for me, private does not mean methods. It means choice. Well, we are free people. We have different preferences, different needs. We can do a lot on the top of UPPS, not instead of the UPPS. So this is really to be remembered. When I refer to FDC, the financial systems, then I do not refer just to pension funds being additional and voluntary. These are things mandated along the same rules for all. And during the working career, we somehow acquire, purchase, right to specific part of the future GDP that next generation will produce after we retire. So this is, again, something really important. So we cannot generate anything today that we will consume later on. What will be consumed next is the next GDP. And we have just rights to participate in sharing GDP and nothing else. This is somehow against our intuition thinking that, well, we can save something for us. It's impossible. We save only virtual rights. The rights should be fair and stable, but they are still virtual. And the whole thing can be institutionalized. And this this can be done either in a well-defined and transparent way or left for future decisions, for future adjustments, not decided ex ante. And this can be also organized when we channel contributions through financial markets, but we can also bypass them. But again, at the end, this is just the future GDP. And we try to offer you for discussion the double dichotomy. So instead of the traditional pay-as-you-go versus funding, because it's misleading. Pay-as-you-go implies just publicly mandated system for all, while funding is additional voluntary. There are apples and oranges. Well, comparing them may lead to a mistake. So instead of that, we propose something which is 4 specific elements, and this is the double dichotomy. And let me stress that the word private does not play any role here. Private means, well, we take a decision outside of UPPS. We may do whatever we want as long as it's along the law. While within UPPS, everything is set up in a way which is standardized. This is a short graph, minor graph, and these 4 possible solutions are drafted here. In all cases, payments by or on behalf of individuals into the UPPS of the current working generations are turned into a kind of pension rights that are transferred over the life cycle into consumption possibilities in old age. Sorry, long definition. I wanted just to have it clearly read. Okay, and we should distinguish the schemes themselves, which are the people and their economic activity. And on the other hand, we have technicalities of managing the system. And these technicalities may vary, and they also should vary. Why not? But this does not change the system itself. The system is the worker or a self-employed paying contributions and eventually receiving a benefit. That's it. That's the whole thing. This is the pension system, and this person cannot receive anything beyond a part of GDP the next generation will be willing and able to share with him or her. And these managing methods may be very different, including contracting out. So the system is publicly mandated, but we can contract out some functions to the private sector. Why not? If that is a good idea, we can do that. If we don't like this, then not. But this is on the top of that. This is not the essence of the whole thing. And regardless of whether UPPS is non-financial or financial, this constitutes the institutional structure for intergenerational exchange. So the young work, produce GDP, and share a part of this GDP with the old. That's it. And irrespective also to the technical construction of the pensions of the retired population are financed out of current GDP. That's easy. And here we have a comparison of endogenous and exogenous systems. So NDC and FDC, I almost always use NDC and FDC together because they are really very, very similar in many of their functions and their characteristics. They are endogenous, which means that they automatically adjust, not require discretional decisions. This does not mean that the old joke, the hood cannot be opened. Well, the hood can be opened, but the politicians are not invited to open it. It should be closed. While in exogenous NDB, well, without manipulating, without fine-tuning from outside, the systems would collapse. So this is the difference. So we can have a system that is automatic, which does not mean we cannot do anything with him, or the system is not automatic and it requires a political action, because without that, everything is gone. And please have a look at this point. This is a description of NDC and FDC. Can you guess which one of the two it is? It's exactly the same. Exactly the same. You cannot say, well, it's a description of NDC or it's a description of FDC. They work along exactly the same rules, as long as it is UPPS, which does not mean we compare apples and oranges. So we do not refer to additional voluntary funded schemes, which exist and should exist, but that's outside of this way of thinking. Okay, and in accumulation phase, NDC and FDC, their individual accounts closely replicate bank saving accounts. This works actually the same. In decumulation phase, the account values are turned into annuities, which is similar to just the regular insurance. So, well, we have a stock of savings turned into a flow of annuities. And the two should correspond to each other. If yes, then the whole system works well. And the beauty of NDC and FDC is that this works both at the micro and at the macro level, because the micro is sufficient for the macro adjustment of the system. So we have individual accounts for all the people. For them, these two values correspond to each other, and then the whole system works well. Of course, nothing is perfect, but well, in general. So non-financial assets, the same as financial ones, are a claim of future GDP. But historically, the non-financial assets backing NDC, they consisted almost always of political promises, not necessarily anchored in the reality. Politicians may promise many things, and well, there is a kind of phenomenon I call time inconsistency, which means that a politician typically lives until next elections. If it's a good politician, then it's 2 elections. But well, the people live for many decades. So the 2 time horizons are not exactly the same. So we should remember that this thinking of assets and liabilities for the future really matter. So rules are needed, because without the rules, well, we don't know what will happen in the future from the point of view of political decisions. Of course, we don't know the future in general, but that's another story. So social laws backing the promises are similar to laws on taxation, which is a problem, because people think that, well, NDC is still a kind of quasi-tax, while FDC is the real savings, money, which is totally misleading. In both cases, these are just virtual pension rights to be turned into real payments in the future. But in the meantime, going through financial markets, or not through the financial market, bypassing them. So the FDC type pension debt is perceived and treated in formal statistics the same as the regular public debt. That's a natural thing, and if you open financial statistics, you see that. But the NDC type debt, on the other hand, although accountable in exactly the same way, is typically treated the same as non-accountable implicit debt. Well, there's a number of reasons for accounting them in a different way. However, from the point of view of the shares in future GDP that constitute a liability financing pensions, there's no difference between them. So I pay €1, and this €1 is something is going on with it, this €1, and a corresponding share of future GDP comes to me. And this is not related to any management-specific methods. Financial markets are not, the effect is the same as the future GDP. And NDC design manages the demographic economic risks, thereby continuously moving towards intertemporal equilibrium with autonomy from the government budget. This autonomy matters. It is the key macroeconomic feature of both these schemes that make them superior to NDB counterparts, this autonomy. And at the micro level, here I'd like to stress the following. NDC and FDC, they combine macro and micro at the same time. While in this traditional thinking of pay-as-you-go versus funding, pay-go is macro and only macro, while additional funding is micro, nothing related to macro. Here we have the two put together. So NDC and FDC, they work both at the macro level and at the micro level. So even though participation is mandatory in both schemes, the contributions are not taxes, even if the link is not one-to-one. But in NDC and FDC, this is just one-to-one. So this is just regular savings, and there's no difference from other savings from the point of view of the long-term liabilities for the future. So the UPPS is the arrangement that fulfills the need of individuals, thus the country's need to transfer income over time and generations, which requires stability of rules. This is a very important point. So these long-term liabilities, they should be stable, while prevention of poverty and other elements of social policy should be elastic, flexible, which require tax financing, and taxes are to an extent to finance this flexibility. This year we need money for this social purpose, 10 years later for something else. But from the point of view of accumulation rights for pensions, this should not make a difference. So stability versus elasticity. So we suggest separation of the goals. So income allocation from poverty alleviation is an efficiency-based employment method, not giving up any of the social security goals. So this is not income allocation instead of poverty alleviation. No, we should apply specific methods for each of the elements. And the transparent information on a continuous working lifelong trade-off between consumption and savings and actuarially neutral calculation of expected payouts helps to take a decision to retire later. We all would like to create a framework, kind of infrastructure for longer working careers. That requires a lot from the health system, from skills, from education, from motivation, everything. But eventually, this, what I mentioned, contributes to a bit better situation. Is that sharp and strong? No. It's step by step, but we observe effects. Some effects are there. And NDC and FDC schemes perform the basic function of creating an economically efficient life cycle longevity insurance scheme with a rate of return based on economic growth. We cannot generate more than the future GDP. So eventually everything will be the same, the future GDP. The question is how it's divided. And NDC and FDC are transparent, economically efficient, fair, and financially sustainable by the virtue of their design. As such, they are superior to NDB and FDB. FDB is not used anymore. And NDC neutrality. This is really important. A clear advantage of NDC is that it does not contain the financial market-based volatility of FDC. Thus, in the end, clearly favors NDC over FDC as a single UPPS. So we do not say NDC is better, but it's better from the point of view of volatility in between the moment of payment and payout. This volatility is smaller, although FDC opens door for international investment, which may be a good idea. And NDC also minimizes undesired externalities by focusing efficiently on the intertemporal transfer of savings and consumption by new generations over cohorts over their entire adult life cycle. So, well, we stress the long-term goal of the system. And this is why we need these stable methods. And the last slide and the conclusions. NDC is not the pension system. And I fully agree with Nick that it's not the pension system, but this is the generic UPPS. Generic UPPS, this means that this is the essence of consumption smoothing, which requires on the top a lot of other things, but this central elements should be kept in a transparent and neutral way. So we can extend it. Well, we may invest in financial markets. So we have contributions, they go to NDC, but well, for a reason, and I will come back to that in the afternoon, we may decide, well, why not we use financial markets for a while, or to some extent, well, we rechannel the contributions. We may think of international investment. Well, why don't we rechannel to investment? Then we need social policy. That should be financed via taxation, top-ups. So, well, we have the generic effect and the top-up effect, which corresponds to our social needs, preferences, and so on. Individual preferences, we may save more or less. These are additional voluntary schemes which can be used in a broad way. All that things can be applied on the top of NDC, but never instead of NDC. NDC is the core of the whole thing, which can be extended and should be extended. So this is the generic UPPS that should work. Actually, a good relation is to medicine. Well, the generic thing is this micro element, which is the same in all pharmaceutics doing the same, but the additions are different. So this is the generic part. The very essence of what we want to achieve. It was long, I know.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you. Well, NDC has advantages. It's a good solution, but As was mentioned in the introduction by Michał, I think, not many countries have introduced this solution, contrary to expectations at the beginning. And that is exactly the topic of the last presentation in this session. Why has NDC remained a scarce pension reform option and solution? Professor Robert Holzmann, Professor of Economics, elected member of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for organizing this conference. Agnieszka and team, I think it was time again to sit together and to discuss the issues, technical parts of it, but also discuss part of my content, you know, why is it that we have essentially so little success to that. I also love to come back to Warsaw, as Nick, we had experienced a long time ago. I was here the first time in 1988 when I was back for the IMF on a technical assistance mission. I returned for the big bank, where I spent 3.5 months in a row, more or less, at the Victoria Hotel in order to work on the big bank. And I love to return now and on because congratulations to Poland. You have been really the success story of transition, and can you be proud of it? So the topic of my talk and also paper is something which bothered me, is I have been also trying to sell NDCs the world over. And at the end of the day, I have to admit, we did not succeed. So the question then is, what does it mean, and why is it that it has been so seldom? And here I have a long story to tell. I don't tell it all of the details, but the first part is a little think about the scarcity of it and what has it to do with some of the different elements there. And then going in some of the elements of political economy, because if we economists think that's ideal, and if the reality thinks it's different, we have to go back to a different, science, and say, well, perhaps we have the economy right, but the political economy wrong. And so what is the political economy there, which I will talk about it. The first one is something we haven't heard too much, but which bothered me out of discussions, is the inequality of life expectancy, which is typically not respected, which is a major part. Another part has to do with simple things, is that NDC is not, how to say, a simple system. It requires quite some technical competences, and often it's not there. Then the third part is, if you move from one system to the others, and you want to do it by the rule, then you have legacy issues, which can be quite hard to finance. Then something political economy, the counterwinds have been with the ILO at the time, with my dear friends there, with whom I had fun, but also within the World Bank itself, which have perhaps contributed to it. And one part which somewhat comes through here in some of discussion is NDC and FDCs, is this now more, how to say, complements or substitutes there? I think at a critical part of the discussion there. And last but not least, coming over to something which I think emerged so far in all of the discussions, is we are in front now of a major new and much stronger challenge which we have to thought about. This is demography. And this demographic challenge there will require that we have to think inside and outside the NDC system. Let me very quickly go through that. NDC, when you talk about NDC, what is this kind of mindset have in mind? Is it the Swedish system, the Rolls-Royce of the system where you have an NDC system, an FDC system, you have nowadays a basic system which covers of it? Or is it something which is more a system which other countries have, and here Poland and others They started out with an FTC, but had to give in to political pressures there. I recall because Michał asked me to go back to talk to the then Minister of Finance and try to plead with him he should give up, not to do away with the financial system. I didn't succeed. So other elements have been there. But one element I want to put on the table to think about it, and here I've not seen a paper yet, perhaps it exists, to see to what extent the major part of NDC has been to think about the contribution, the lifelong contribution, as a critical element in thinking about how a pension system should be constructed. And so there may have been elements there that NDC somewhat inspired countries to take account of the contribution lengths, but not make an NDC system about it. And one of those countries is my home country, Austria. They did it. They brought the contribution to the table, but they did in such a way is that they really screwed up the whole system, because we have now a country quite likely with one of the highest expenditures, GDP 15%. But the way it is done, I won't go into the detail, I'll let you read there. It is that actually we have cemented it, because what is happening is that every year, at the end of every year, each contribution is automatically translated into a pension amount. And this is indexed with, let's say, GDP growth there, or wage growth there. And so every year you can look at it, how much it is. And but given this one, of course, it's very difficult to do a reform, because then if people are close to retirement and say, now I have to build in life expectancy, politically it's impossible. So this is a mess we have to come with. So we may have been inspired by NDC, but to some extent in the wrong direction. So this is the first part of it. So the question then is, political economy, and I went through it, took AI to see what arguments are there, and only the first paper in the first book on NDC, which was written by Brooks and Weavers, you can read it again, it's still very up to date what it is, a very good paper. The point of political economy is that it's the political part which makes it stupid. And this is different from the economic thinking, political part of it. And why is it politically that NDC didn't fly? Where's Marek? He, over there, yes, exactly. You make the great point, you know why NDC is such an important system, but politicians give a damn about it. They don't get elected because they go for the best system in the world. They get elected because they provide differentiated advantages to a certain group of voters. That's the reason. And this is the part of it why NDC, how to say, is not so widely spread as it could be. So the political part of it, it's nice to read through, but it doesn't tell us too much. The story now I tell a little bit has to do with my prior job when I tried to sell NDC worldwide. And one of the arguments which come up pretty quickly was when I worked at World Bank, I was also put in charge by President Wilferson of the trade union relationship. So World Bank, the leadership of the world trade unions, and we had meetings, technical meetings, big meetings there. And of course, we brought to the table NDCs as a great pension system. But one argument's come out very quickly, yes, but we have workers that die early, and the workers where the others live long. So NDCs doesn't take account of it. So, and this does, we don't want to have it. I had it at a national level, but also when I talked to the Austrian trade union leader. And so the question is, okay, it's fine. Is this a good argument? After the World Bank, I had some time in order to deal with this research. And what emerged is that, yes, it's a quite critical element there. And here we have, how to say, translation of the differences in life expectancy translated in a tax subsidy framework. The left hand is for the US, the right hand is for Wales and England. And it shows, first of all, of course, nobody wants to talk about it. The big advantages women have to live longer, you know. One is quite often not inclined to take account of it. And so what you have for the US is that females in the US would be an Asian female that gets a subsidy of almost 20%, participating in a linear system. And black worker would get a tax of minus 30%, so a difference of 50% there. Other countries have lower, but there's still not good statistics out there. I used KI and didn't find too much of it, but it's about the same. And given these differences, of course, one has to do something about it. One can, for example, calculate individualized division factors, you know. This, of course, would be open to political pressures there. But there's a very simple way of doing it. If one were to allocate 50% of individual and 50% by the average, it's Korea who does it, and it is a very good approximation there. So inequality needs to be taken into account. A second part, which is often not understood, has to do that NDC is technically quite complex because you need to have, how to say, contributions, you have to record them. It doesn't lend to them, how to say, you do it only by hand. You need to have electronics, you need to this and that, so it's quite complicated. And this was at the beginning of the transition, something also the World Bank get involved, is to implement computers into these countries. I recall because I organized a conference here early on, and it showed that bringing in this kind of this technicality is not easy. So if you don't have it, you cannot do NDCs. And this may be one of the reasons why countries like Brazil, Egypt, and other stands never made it to NDCs, because simply technically they couldn't do it. Point number 3 is this legacy. So if you move from whatever system you have towards an NDC system, and particularly if the old system is more expensive and has a higher implicit contribution rate, and now you want to go to something which is cheaper, the legacy cost is pretty high. And one figure I put on the table, it's by a worker, also Colette in China, is the China pension system, so what is called the system of the city workers there. You can see it's the implicit contribution rate was much higher. The new one would have been lower. This is the old rate, this is the new rate. And here you have high and low estimates. And these are the estimates in GDP. If you have this kind of implicit debt, and you want to pay it back, of course, it's beyond capacity, and it's another reason why NDC didn't fly, because people, countries, politicians didn't want to do it. Point number 6 is something which how to say, it's the soft part of the discussion, is of course, when the World Bank came up and became, how to say, somewhat the leader in the international pension discourse, one of the institutions, the ILO, was not happy with it, because they've been doing it for many more decades than we did it. And I had a dear friend there, but we were harsh competitors. Michael Sichon, actually his name was Michał Sichon, a German but Polish background, as you can hear it by the name. And when we were in front of an audience, we struggled and people were afraid for our whiles. But at the end, we were close friends. And so we had a lot of, how to say, wind from this side, but not only for this side, but also within the World Bank. How to say, within the World Bank, there has been aficionados of NDC, but we had huge wins from the financial sector. How to say, they give us real difficulties. Michał could talk more about it because he was already then in charge of it, what kind of wind we had against it in order to sell NDCs there. So this may be also one of the reasons why NDC did not succeed as much, because both from the one side, from the other side, it didn't happen. Seventh point I want to put on the table is FTC, NDCs now, how to say, kind of a competitor, or is it more a complement there? Competitor, don't have to explain it, you know, we do it this way, we do it that way. But a complement, my take is, it is more of a complement. The reason is that if you want to have an additional FTC system, my strong experience is a funded system in a country does not work unless the unfunded basic system is financially sound. If the basic system is not financially sound, or how to say, you always get knocking like in Poland, but also in Latvia, you know, they always come in and they want to take some of the contribution rates in order to finance the public system. And so the question is, if this is the case, well, what is the system which promises financial stability? NDC. So for the reason I think NDC and FTCs are more complements and need to be seen together in order to work. And the last part there, I will be a bit longer and I stay still within my time frame, has to do now, how are we addressing the big change we have in front of us. And this simple equation there, you know, revenues needs to be expenditure, and what does it mean? What are the policy instruments there in order to deal with demography and shocks on demography, what we have in front of us? Either you increase contributions, or you reduce the average benefits, or you do something about the retirement age. There's no other elements there which is able to solve your financial part of it. And so if this is the case, then what can we do? How can NDC then save it? And here we have, of course, a problem that NDCs works very well if and as, to say, you have a demography which is still positive, in which you still have a purse which, how to say, creates a positive or a fertility rate of about 2.1 there. And it's still okay if you have migration, albeit later on, I'm sure the paper will show. And to see it, migration is not so easy, because if you have people coming in at midterm, you know, you have to finance them out of it, but at least demographically. But if you have not the one or the others, you have problem. And here, putting together life expectancy, well, we have for three blocks there, the global north, US, Europe, and China. As you can see, they all come much closer together. Looks like that it's flattening enough, but it's still going on there. But the other part is with the demographic process, which I'm sure has not escaped your attention, but escaped the attention for much of the rest of it. We are nowadays in front of a demographic tsunami, because we have the world population is going not to stabilize in 2200, not in 2100, but quite likely already in 1985 or even before, which means that we have really a demographic problem there. And the question is now how to deal with it. And here NDC, given this demographic part of it, and Marek already alluded to it, coming back first, is that we don't have too many elements in order to deal with the demography there. Lower benefits, higher contribution rates, or later retirement. And so in an NDC system, if the other part of the demography doesn't work, then essentially we have a problem, because in NDC, if we have a projected deficit there, it would mean a lower indexation, an indexation which is below the GDP growth there. And this is, of course, politically very difficult to agree with it. You cannot really do it. So, besides, and this is something I like to show, this is the old age dependency ratio for, you have here the European Union, we have it for the US and China, and what you see there, we have still further deterioration of about half of it we had in the past. China moves up very quickly out of it. So these are really demographic challenges, we have to deal with it. And given this one, then the question is, it's not, back out of it. What to do with an NDC system under these circumstances? The part is that the normal retirement age increase dividing through the remaining life expectancy is not sufficient. We have to prepare really for a much more stronger approach. We have to develop the labor market for the elderly, because I think it's the senior labor market we have to prepare, which goes well beyond we have thought in the past. We have to think really keeping people on the labor market well beyond 70 and into the 80s there. And this is something, how to say, which we have not awakened yet up the population. And this is independent of the pension system, which is there, and the C system there. And I think this will be the real challenge for all people working whatever pension system they are, how to make it happen. And this is not something, how to say, which will go easy, because for the time being, politicians totally neglected that this is a reality. And this is something, how to say, which will be out the pension system, but a critical part of it. And with one sentence, this is something which is some of my side parts of it I'm currently doing. For the rest of it, I became, how to say, part of a management team working on startups and in the energy part of it. But when I have still some spare time, then I'm thinking also about this part of it. And I'm looking forward to the questions now. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay here. Yeah, because, thank you very much. We have an enormously rich material for discussion, and obviously a limited time for the discussion. But still, I would like to ask all the speakers to come to the podium. So we had 6 speakers. So Anna, Vincenzo, Agnieszka, Nick, Marek, and Robert. Please take here the seats, and we have something like approximately 10 minutes for a short discussion. I got the permission from Agnieszka to do it a bit longer, but only a few minutes. We will take only a few minutes out of your coffee break, which is always a bad thing, of course. But we started 10 minutes 10 minutes later. So I know that the presenters could discuss, but we already a discussion has started partly, but I would rather encourage our audience first to ask questions or make comments. So please use this, and obviously please treat this short discussion only as an introduction to the discussion throughout the whole conference. We will discuss during breaks, during next sessions, during dinner, and so on and so on. But now we have the initial possibility. So please feel free to use this opportunity. And I would like to ask for introducing yourself very briefly and formulating a question or making a comment. And if you do it to if you address it to an individual speaker, please indicate the speaker. Zosia. Could somebody help with the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for those fantastic presentations. It's really a lot to think. I will ask one question.
Introduce yourself briefly.
You introduced me, Zosia. You didn't say anything else, Zosia. Okay, my name is Zofia Rutkowska. Currently, I work for the Institute of Labor and Social Studies. And my question would be mainly to Marek in the context of inequality. This is something I am really looking at nowadays, and I think this is very interesting. And Professor Holzmann also mentioned this issue, yes, inequality, taking the US as an example, and it is an example, it is really an example. There's a big discussion there on inequalities, not just that there is different pension wealth for like blacks and women, but also in other areas. So my question would be, Marek, to you, very specific, although there will be more. What do you think about funded scheme? I do not share Professor Gajewski's view on funding. No, not at all. But just wanted to ask you, if you think, as many American colleagues, I mean, professors, experts claim that the funded scheme, especially 401k, contributed to a deepening inequalities and pushing pensioners to employment. It is said that they cannot afford to retire. That's the mantra also there. But it's US. So I just wanted to ask you what you think, why, and if it is really the danger. Thank you.
Thank you, Zosia. Marek, could I ask? Maybe it would be better to react immediately.
Thanks for the question. It does. Okay. So answering to your question, well, for me, there are two types of funded schemes. First is voluntary additional, which I do not really deal with, which I think is an interesting part of pension universe. But, well, for me, what's more important is the funded part understood as FDC, financial defined contribution within UPPS, and then there's no effect similar to what you mentioned. And of course, the US example doesn't hold here because what they have is only additional voluntary funded schemes. They don't have FDC in the sense we discuss here. So answering to your question is go somehow beyond my own thinking, my own focus of interest, but I think that funding will not solve problems. Funding is a method. So if it works, well, we should apply it, but it should not be kept as the direction. It's just one of possibilities. outside of UPPS, within UPPS, it plays another role.
Thank you. The next question or comment?
Thank you. Irena Kotowska. I am demographer from Warsaw School of Economics. Thank you for this all presentation. And I'm especially grateful for your attention put to this demographic change. I think that this is very important point, that this system was designed when we had some expectation about the future stages of population development. But it was the case that demographers, and not only demographers, observed that our expectation towards this demographic transition are different what really happened. And we, as demographer, did not expect so deep and resisting low fertility. And what is important, I think now that this aging is now more impacted by the changes at the bottom of the age pyramid, and which influence the strongest changes in age structure. So this is really huge, I think we have to think about. And thank you for the aspect. So we have to discuss about the post-transitional phase, which features of this phase are not well, I would say, acknowledged and known. So we have to think about this component. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. Yes, please. Two more reactions, maybe to more and to last. So first here, and then the next one. Yep, here.
Himanshi Jain from the World Bank. My question is for Anna, but I think others could also respond. So when you speak about the speeding mechanism, I think as if a politician is looking at those numbers, and if the average public is looking at those numbers, yes, you can adjust the benefit levels if you have a surplus, but especially given the labor market and anxiety around digital transformation, AI, is there ever sort of a conversation around what about reducing contribution rates? And is there sort of this tension between, what the NDC champions think should be the adjustment mechanism, whereas what younger people anxious about jobs think the adjusting mechanism should be? So that's all from my side.
Thank you. Anna, please.
Thank you for the question. I actually got it the other evening as well from another person who said the same thing as you do. But I think you have to see this from a Swedish context. I mean, we like huge welfare systems. So no, I wouldn't say there have been any discussion on lower the contributions. On contrary, politicians on the left side, they want to increase the contributions to the public pension scheme from 18.5. So, but it's actually been the social partners who has been increasing the contributions. May I add a very small comment also on the financial, the FDC systems. We evaluate the premium pension system each year in Sweden, and it's been a huge success. We have had problems with fraud and so on, but at the moment, it's 11% higher interest rates, or the increase of pensions in the premium system than it's been in the income pension system per year for 20 years, 25 years. And you also look at the distribution. We have an open market for funds. So we have a huge amount of funds. So people have a huge variety of how much money they get. Nevertheless, 98% of all population is getting a higher, 2% higher interest rate in the premium system compared with the income pension system. So it's been very, very successful, adding a lot of value to the system. And it's sort of using the gains of the capital market. It's been a success for us, at least so far.
Thank you very much. The last question or comment from the audience. Yes, please.
The question is, avec the OECD, My question is actually for Vincenzo, because I think he said something very important, which I share, is how aging will affect the basically returns on NDC in Italy and basically the fall, as you show on the benefit ratio. This will also be the case in Poland and Latvia. Because of the design of the NDC, it just makes things transparent. It shows what happens. And the big question, of course, is then what you think is the remedy, because that will threaten in the end potentially political or social sustainability of NDC.
Wow, that's a $1 million question, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the link between labor market and pension in a little bit, so I'm going to be very quick. I think this is actually a problem that it's shared by all the pay-as-you-go system, regardless of whether or not they are NDC, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's what you can pay out of at steady state, what you can pay is going to be given by economic growth and demographic growth. So I don't see this as being like, but you're right, that in the NDC system, this is pretty clear. And so to some extent, you can blame it on the system and more than you can blame it like in general on the politicians. Now, what I think is probably going to happen, it's a bit like Anna was saying, there's going to be a little bit more of a push towards introducing more capitalization. Now, having said that, if your total contribution rate is 33%, as it is in Italy, there's little room for making any sort of adjustment. So that's going to be very complicated, yeah.
Final comment from Robert. Sorry, I will not. Okay, maybe another way to equality. 1 minute, one sentence, one message at the end from every participant. You can start, please.
Thanks. I would like to draw the attention to one feedback loop, which should not matter too much for pensions, but it does. That is that the feedback loop from the funded system towards productivity, where funding is a necessary but not a sufficient condition to make it happen. And we see it very clearly. Sweden has it, the feedback loop, where the Netherlands have it, Denmark have it, the others don't have it. One can say, well, doesn't matter for pensions, but it does because it makes a major contribution to productivity. And if one doesn't do it, but a necessary, not a sufficient, happy to talk more about it in detail, but I don't.
Thank you. Anna, some more final comment? Marek, one sentence.
Okay, well, so let me just focus again on the key point of my presentation. Let's go beyond the 20th century. Comparing oranges and apples means pay as you go and funding and turn it for something new, more suitable for the 21st century.
Please.
Declining fertility is creating a tidal wave which will exert downward pressure on all pension systems. And that illustrates a point that I made in my talk. Automatic adjustment is great, but the idea that you can rely wholly on automatic adjustment with no discretionary adjustment simply won't fly. I mean, what Anna said was an example of that. Sweden has, for all its automatic system, has introduced some discretionary changes and introduced them well.
And the final word from Agnieszka, the organizer.
I think that Nick stole my sentence on declining fertility, which is of a crucial importance. And given that, it is extremely important to think about productivity and social investment and human capital investment, basically from birth and from entry to the labor market, so that we really have efficient mechanisms at the labor market that support job reach, contributory reach, working lives that lead to more stable pension systems.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this amazing session. A perfect introduction. Thank you. Coffee break. coffee break for all of us. Thank you.